For 30 years, Johnny Carson made America laugh. His timing was flawless, his charm effortless, and every night, he turned The Tonight Show into a ritual of comfort and comedy. But behind that perfect smile was a world the audience never saw. A world of tension, buried scandals, and moments so uncomfortable that NBC tried to erase them forever. There were episodes that vanished, interviews that went wrong, and friendships destroyed in silence. Carson wasn't just a talk show host. He was a perfectionist guarding an empire built on control. But even he couldn't escape the chaos that came with live television. What follows are the stories that slipped through the cracks, the shocking feuds, the lost tapes, and the nights that left even Johnny Carson shaken. These were the moments producers tried to hide and the truth they could never completely bury. The lost episode that never aired. It was supposed to be another smooth night in Burbank. The audience filled the studio. The band struck its opening notes and Johnny Carson walked out from behind the curtain, smiling, sharp and ready. But before the credits could roll, something went terribly wrong. The show that followed was so chaotic, so disturbing that NBC executives buried it completely. No transcript, no rerun, not even a production record remained. Crew members later whispered about that night in fragments. Some said the guests suffered an emotional breakdown live on stage, shouting, crying, or revealing something that left Carson frozen in silence. Others claimed a fight erupted backstage that spilled into the show. A few believed Carson himself snapped under pressure, unable to regain control of the room. For a man who built his career on timing and poise, this was unthinkable. After the broadcast, NBC called an emergency meeting. The footage was locked away and soon after destroyed. A few insiders tried to retrieve copies, but found nothing. It was as if the episode had never existed. Even the official network catalog had no entry for that date. The tape was wiped, the reels burned, and the staff were told to forget it ever happened. Carson himself never mentioned the incident again. When asked about it years later, he brushed it off or changed the subject entirely. Those who worked closest to him said it haunted him, that something during that show cracked the carefully controlled image he'd built over decades. He was never quite the same after that, one former producer admitted. He laughed less off camera. The mystery only deepened after Carson's death in 2005. Fans and television historians searched for any trace, a still frame, an archived note, a witness who remembered more. Nothing surfaced. The show remained a ghost in NBC's history, a night erased from public memory. The Joan Rivers betrayal and the fall of a friendship. For more than 2 decades, Joan Rivers was Johnny Carson's closest ally in late-night television. He discovered her in the 1960s, gave her her first big break, and even told her on air during her debut, "You're going to be a star." To Johnny, she was the perfect guest, witty, fast, and fearless. To Joan, he was more than a mentor. He was family. But in 1986, that bond shattered in one of television's most painful betrayals. When Fox offered Rivers her own late-night talk show, it was historic. She'd become the first woman ever to host a show in that format. But she made one critical mistake. She didn't tell Carson. The contract wasn't finalized yet, and she feared the news would leak or the deal would collapse. She planned to tell him once everything was certain, but before she could, the media broke the story. When Joan called to explain, Carson hung up on her. No words, no chance for forgiveness, just silence. That same night, he ordered NBC to ban her from The Tonight Show permanently. She was never invited back during his lifetime. It wasn't just professional anger. It was personal heartbreak. Carson had built an empire on loyalty and trust, and to him, Rivers's move felt like betrayal. The fallout was brutal. Rivers's show on Fox struggled, and her husband, Edgar Rosenberg, who produced it, took his own life just months after its cancellation. Joan was devastated, grieving her husband and the loss of the man who once called her a star. Carson, however, never reached out. The two never spoke again. In later interviews, Rivers said the silence haunted her. "He was my hero," she admitted, "and losing his friendship was like losing part of myself." When she finally returned to The Tonight Show in 2014, nearly 30 years later, Johnny was long gone. It was a full-circle moment that arrived too late. Wayne Newton's confrontation and the night Carson was threatened. In the 1970s, Johnny Carson's monologues were legendary, sharp, fearless, and often cutting. But one recurring target took those jokes personally. Wayne Newton, the Las Vegas singer once called Mr. Entertainment, became a punchline on The Tonight Show. Carson teased his flamboyant style, his appearance, even hinting at his sexuality. For years, Newton laughed it off, believing it was all in good fun. But when the jokes didn't stop, something in him finally broke. Behind the bright lights, Newton was fighting to protect his image. The rumors that he was effeminate or secretly gay began to affect his career and personal life. He called Carson's office multiple times, asking him to stop. Each call went unanswered. Finally, after enduring months of humiliation, Newton took matters into his own hands. According to those who witnessed it, Newton stormed into NBC's Burbank studios unannounced, heading straight for Carson's office. Inside, Johnny was in a production meeting with longtime producer Fred de Cordova. Newton interrupted and demanded a private word. The room went silent. When they were alone, Newton reportedly said, "If you ever make another joke about me, I'll kick your ass." Carson, normally calm and unflappable, didn't laugh. He simply stared back.
Those who knew him say it was one of the few times he looked genuinely shaken. After that day, the joke stopped, but so did any friendship between them. Carson never invited Newton back to the show. Years later, Newton spoke publicly about the incident, calling Carson a mean-spirited human being and accusing him of fueling false rumors that nearly destroyed his reputation. He claimed that Carson's influence over NBC and the entertainment press made it impossible to defend himself. It wasn't comedy anymore, Newton said. It was cruelty. The confrontation became a dark legend in Hollywood. The night a guest dared to stand up to the king of late-night television. But for both men, it left scars. Newton's career never fully recovered from the gossip, and Carson's reputation as a quiet, ruthless perfectionist only deepened. When Charles Grodin challenged Carson on air, by 1990, Johnny Carson was untouchable. He had outlasted rivals, scandals, and network politics. But one night, a guest walked onto his stage and dared to challenge him in front of millions. That guest was Charles Grodin, an actor and sadist known for his deadpan humor and ability to blur the line between comedy and confrontation. What began as a routine interview quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in The Tonight Show's history. Grodin had been a regular guest for years, often using dry sarcasm to poke fun at the talk show format itself, but this time his tone felt different. Midway through the segment, after a few awkward exchanges, Grodin leaned in and asked Carson, "Do you even care about your guests?" The question hit like a slap. The audience fell silent. Carson, usually quick with a quip, froze for a split second before replying sharply, "Of course I do." But Grodin didn't back down. He pressed further, questioning the sincerity of the interviews, implying that Carson was more interested in his own spotlight than the people sitting across from him. What followed wasn't comedy. It was tension. The laughter died, replaced by a sense of disbelief. Nobody knew if it was an act or an actual argument unfolding live on television. Carson's face tightened. His voice, normally smooth and measured, became clipped and defensive. He wasn't used to being challenged, least of all on his own stage. When the segment ended, the applause felt forced, the smiles rehearsed. But behind the scenes, producers were stunned. Some urged Carson to cut the segment from reruns entirely, worried it exposed too much of his real temperament. Carson refused. "Leave it in," he reportedly said. "People should see it." That decision became one of the most revealing moments of his career. It showed Johnny Carson not as the flawless master of charm, but as a human being, defensive, proud, and tired of pretending. For once, the king of late night wasn't in control, and it made for one of the most riveting and painful interviews ever aired on The Tonight Show. Shelley Winters throws a drink at Oliver Reed. Live television has always carried the risk of chaos. But even by Tonight Show standards, the night Shelley Winters and Oliver Reed shared the couch became unforgettable. It was 1975, and both actors were on the show to promote new projects. Reed, the British actor known for his wild behavior and heavy drinking, had already built a reputation for pushing boundaries. Carson expected trouble, but not what actually happened. As the conversation began, Reed grew increasingly unruly. He made a series of crude, sexist remarks about women in Hollywood, including comments about Winters herself. The audience chuckled nervously, unsure whether he was joking or just being obnoxious. Winters, a seasoned performer who had spent her life fighting to be taken seriously in a male-dominated industry, tried to brush it off at first, but Reed kept going, louder, rudder, and more vulgar with each line. Finally, she'd had enough. Without a word, Winters picked up her drink and threw it straight into Reed's face. The studio gasped. Carson's jaw dropped. Reed sat frozen, dripping wet, while Winters calmly crossed her legs and said, "That's for every woman you've ever insulted." It was one of the few moments in Carson's career when he looked genuinely speechless. The tension was thick, not the playful kind, but something raw and real. For once, late-night comedy had turned into confrontation. The segment ended early, and during the commercial break, Carson reportedly turned to his producer, muttering, "We can't rerun this." NBC executives agreed. When the show aired in reruns, large portions of the exchange were cut to protect the network's image, but word spread quickly, and the unedited broadcast became a legend among late-night historians. Proof that beneath the laughter, The Tonight Show could become a battlefield.